shall be discussing the poem A Legend of the Northland by Phoebe Cary, explanation and devices done in details. Before I begin with the explanation, there are certain things, interesting things that I feel that you should know about. First of all, this is a legend of Northland. So what is Northland? Northland refers to any extremely cold country in the Earth's North Polar region. Okay, any cold country, Canada, Greenmark, Norway, Russia, in the Earth's North Polar region. So this legend does not belong to one particular country. It belongs to this group of countries known as the Northland. So what is this legend about? This legend is about an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed. There is one question: what is a legend? Now, a legend is a story about a hero, a larger than life hero from the past, many years back. So what happened here is that there is a historical background, that these are real people, but some additions have been made. Something magical, some exaggeration, some supernatural element has been added to their stories, which makes them a legend. And the purpose of a legend is to teach a moral. If I give you certain examples of legends, like we see here, Tenali Raman is a very famous Indian legend. So this person was there, believed to be there, and then some of his tales are little magical, little unbelievable. So that is what makes it a legend. Similarly, you all must be aware of, the legend of Robin Hood and legend of Lord Buddha. So there is history to it, reality to it. In addition, some supernatural, magical elements. But the purpose of legend is mostly to give a lesson, to teach a moral. And this poem, this story, this legend of Northland is a ballad. Now, what is a ballad? Ballad is a song narrating a story. It's very simple story which is not narrated like a story, but it is narrated in the form of a poem. It's called a ballad, and ballads are a part of almost all folk cultures across the globe. Usually they were passed on orally from one generation to the other, but yes, of course, now there are written accounts of legends to make it more permanent. So coming to the first stanza: away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. So what is the poet trying to say here? That in the region around the North Pole, that is in Northland, in the region around the North Pole, where the hours of the day are few. Now, why are days shorter here? Because it is a scientific fact, because its position is such that the sun's rays reach there for a very less time, and therefore days are shorter and the nights are longer. And when this area, this Northland, is experiencing winter season especially, the duration of the night is very long. The nights are so long in winter. So the nights are very long and the day hours are very less. So they are so long that the poet has mentioned here that it becomes extremely difficult for the people there to sleep throughout the night. For example, if the night is, say, for 18 hours, you can't sleep at a stretch for 18 hours. So to emphasize this, the poet has written that they cannot sleep them through. It becomes very difficult for the people of Northland to sleep throughout the night. And what is they here? They means the people. They refers to the people of Northland, people who live in this region. And the night is so long that the people cannot sleep them through. So if they go to bed, then they wake up when it is still night time. Stanza 2. If you want to have a further discussion on the topic in a live session with me, kindly write to me at englishwithsushmita@gmail.com, and I will inform you whenever I have my live session next. Thank you. Stanza 2. Where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bear cubs in their funny furry clothes. So what is a reindeer? Is an animal that is used to transport goods and people from one place to the other in snowy regions. So this is the reindeer, and they harness. Harness is this equipment with the strap and the buckle which is used to fasten. This is used in rock climbing and all. So here, to tie the reindeer to this sledge, this is called a sledge, which is used to pull goods and people from one place to the other. So this harness, this blue thing you can see, this entire equipment of the strap and the buckle is called harness. So where this reindeer is harnessed to this sledge. So this is one fact about the Northland that the poet has just mentioned. And the children look like bear cubs. Why do the children look like cubs of a bear? Because they are wearing furry clothes, and the poet finds it funny. And why bear cubs? Because the children look cuddly and soft like babies of a bear, cubs of a bear, right? And he also adds that young children, they look like bear because they wear funny looking clothes made of fur, which is like the furry skin of a bear. Stanza 3. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it's true. And yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. In line 1, again, they refers to the parents or elders, and them refers to the children or the younger generation here. They is the parents, and them refers to the children, that is the younger generation. So here the poet is saying that the elders of the Northland region, they tell a strange and an interesting story. Curious is strange and interesting story to the younger generation. So the poet here also mentions that he doesn't think that the story is true, but if he tells the story to the reader, maybe the reader could learn a lesson from it. I don't believe it's true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. And the story gives an important message. That is why the poet says that the readers or the listeners of this particular legend will definitely learn a lesson, because the story gives an important message. Once when the good Saint Peter, so this is now the actual legend begins. Once when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching, just as he did you know. You all must know who is Saint Peter. Saint Peter is believed to be one of the messengers of Lord Jesus, and the gates of heaven are said to be guarded by Saint Peter. You all should have this information. So the Saint Peter was, is a legend. Right. So the poet says here, so this story is about Saint Peter, when Saint Peter used to live in the world below, because now he is believed to be, now this is the supernatural element here in this legend. Now he is believed to be in heaven, guarding the gates of heaven. But this legend, this story is of a time when Saint Peter lived in the world below. World below means earth. Okay. Saint Peter was still living. He was on earth and walked about it preaching. As all saints, they preach, they teach about religion. So he also went around the world giving religious lectures to people, just like all saints do. And why does the poet say here, just as he did you know? You means we all know what saints do. They roam around the globe talking about religion, preaching religion. And then an incident happened. He came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. So what happens here? When Saint Peter was moving around the world giving religious lectures to people, he reached the door of a cottage where a small woman was making cakes. Here cakes actually means bread, loaves of bread, and you will understand why I am saying bread and not cakes. there are certain words, there are certain references in the poem that you will understand that these are by cakes. The poet means loaves of bread. So while traveling, when he came to the door of a cottage, while traveling, a little woman was making cakes, bread loaves, right? And where was she doing it? She was baking the cakes on the hearth. Now, hearth is the fireplace. This kind of an oven is called hearth. It is a wood fire oven, which is now it is known as that is hearth, because at that time there were no electrical ovens. So she was baking bread on the hearth, this firewood oven, and you can see here, this is bread what she is baking. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. And being faint with fasting, as Saint Peter had not eaten anything the entire day, he was very hungry and feeling weak. Now, saints don't eat too much, right? They observe fast, they eat only what is required. Like, we most of the time tend to overeat, but that's not the case with saints. So saints eat when it is required. So throughout the day he had not eaten anything, he was very hungry and faint with fasting. Faint with fasting means he was feeling weak. Faint here means weak. So he was feeling very weak because he had not eaten the entire day. So what he does, he went to this woman who was baking cakes, that's bread, and he asked for one cake out of the many cakes that she had baked. He asked her from a store of cakes to give him a single one. So he asked her to give him one of the loaves of bread that she had baked. So she made a little cake, a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. So what did this woman do? The woman was a selfish woman. So she did not give the saint one of the cakes from her store, the cakes that she had already baked. Instead, what she did, she started making a very small cake, a little cake. So she made a little cake, means a smaller loaf of bread. She did not want to share what she had already made. Maybe she thought that they were too big. And that's what the poet says in the next two lines. But as it baking lay, so as the bread was kept for baking, she saw it, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. She saw it and thought that it was too big. She did not want to give a large loaf of bread to her, cake to her, to him, sorry. What did she do next? Therefore, she needed another and still a smaller one, but it looked when she turned it over as large as the first had done. So the little woman was so miser, so selfish, so greedy that she needed another. So this word needed tells you that it was a loaf of bread, because for cake you make a batter, for bread you make a dough. A batter is not needed. A batter is beaten or mixed. A dough is something which is needed. So this one word tells you that the poet actually means bread here and not cake. So what she did, when she found that the previous loaf was big, she needed another, still a smaller one, right? But it looked when she turned it over. So when she maybe changed the side of the bread in the oven, what did she find? That she thought that it was as large as the first had done. So it was not small enough to be shared, and she was not ready to give this smaller cake to Saint Peter. What does she do next? See, this is all showing her greed, her inability to share. She did not want to share what she had. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough. Again, if you see here, this word dough tells you that here by cake the poet means loaf of bread, because for Making a cake, you make a batter, but not dough. Dough is required for making bread. And rolled it flat. So also this rolling action, you don't do it while baking a cake. Rolling is done while baking bread. So these three words, dough, rolling, and one word if we see, kneading from the previous stanza. These three words tell you that it is actually bread that the poet is talking about. And rolled it flat. She rolled it very thin and baked it thin as a wafer, but she could not part with that. So the poet says that she rolled and rolled. Why does the poet repeat the word rolled? Because he wants to lay emphasis on the fact that she rolled the dough really thin and made it like a wafer. This is what a wafer is, extremely thin. So you can imagine how greedy that woman was, that she rolled the dough for baking the bread extremely thin like a wafer. But she was so greedy that she could not part with that. She could not even give that thin bread to the saint. For she said, my cakes that seem too small, when I eat them myself, are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. So what does she say to justify her action? That she reasoned it, that when she ate the cakes, she baked the cakes for themselves. The cakes which seemed too small, when she ate them herself, they seemed very large when there was a question of giving it away. So every time she baked a smaller loaf of bread, she kept it back on the shelf instead of giving it to the saint. What happens as a result of her action of greed? Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. So eventually Saint Peter got provoked. He got really angry because he was very hungry and he was feeling very weak, and the selfish woman was not ready to give him even a small bread. So this behavior of the greedy woman angered the saint. Provoke. It was enough to provoke, to anger the saint. And what did he do as a result of that? And he said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm. So he eventually curses this woman. So now here, this is the supernatural element which makes it a legend. Like curses usually are not believed to be true. So Saint Peter cursed the woman and said that she was very selfish and she did not deserve to live like a human being, dwell in a human form, live in a human form. She does not deserve to live in a human form, or to have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm. It was a cold region, as I have told you previously, and their people used fire to keep themselves warm. So the Saint Peter cursed her that she did not deserve to be a human being and should be so comfortable, should be getting her food and shelter and fire to keep her warm so easily, so comfortably, because she did not want to share them with anybody. So this is the curse that Saint Peter gave to the old lady. What does he say next? Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood. So he cursed her after that day that she would become a bird because she did not deserve a human form. She should become a bird, and just like all other birds, you shall build as the birds do. So like all other birds build their home with lots and lots of hard work. and shall get your scanty food. So you will just get little bit food, like birds, you know, they work very hard throughout the day and they get very little food. It's not that they have got stores of food, they get lots and lots of food. They get only ample scanty food which is enough for them to live, and for that also they have to do a lot of hard work. And this is what Saint Peter cursed her, that just like bird builds their houses by boring into the wood and collect very little food by working hard the entire day, similarly she would also have to work hard in the dry wood all day and get only little food and make small place for herself to live in. As soon as the Saint Peter cursed the woman, she did not get a chance to speak for herself. Then she up went through the chimney, never speaking a word. So immediately after the curse, the moment Saint Peter cursed her, she changed into a woodpecker. This is a woodpecker, and you all know woodpecker is a bird which keeps on boring and boring, you know, pecking on the wood, the bark of trees with its beak, and does a lot of hard work. So the Saint Peter cursed the old woman to be a woodpecker. Then up she went through the chimney. So through the chimney of her cottage, she flew up to the roof in the form of a woodpecker. The woman, the old lady, got converted into a woodpecker. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same. But all the rest of her clothes were burned black as a coal in the flame. The woman was wearing a bright red cap, and this cap was there on the bird's head too. If you see here in the picture, the head of the woodpecker is scarlet. This red, bright red color is called the scarlet color. And the old lady was wearing a scarlet cap, so that remained the same. So this is the resemblance, why it is said that Saint Peter cursed the woman to be a woodpecker. It's because of the scarlet cap. We can say that because she was wearing a scarlet cap, and this cap you can see on the bird's head also, not in the form of a cap, but the bird's head is red. But what happened to the woman's remaining clothes as she passed from the chimney? Her clothes turned black in color, just like the coal. Okay, so because of the flame, all her clothes became black. Now this is again mentioned in the legend. Now you might question, the cap should also have got burnt, but this is the relationship that the legend wants to give between the woodpecker and the woman, because of the scarlet cap and the scarlet head of the woodpecker. This is the close resemblance, and why it is said that the woman was cursed to become a woodpecker, easily recognizable here because of the red head, and rest all her clothes became black, burned in the flame, became black just like coal. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood, where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. It's a simple stanza which tells that people who live in the countryside, even the small children, when they go to school, they have seen such kind of bird in the woods. It means that they have seen the woodpecker and they know the story, and they see that she stays there all day and keeps on digging the wood with her beak to collect her food, where she lives in the trees till this very day. So it's a very old legend, but obviously woodpecker must be seen there, and the children, because they know the legend, so they feel that she stays there all day, keeps on digging the wood with her beak to collect her food. And why are children told this tale? To be taught what message? That they should not be selfish and learn to share their resources with the ones in need. This is the message that the legend gives, that one should not be selfish and we should share our resources with the ones in need. Moving on to the literary devices used in the poem, stanza 1 has repetition, away, away, repetition is repeating words in the same line. Away, away in the Northland. That is, if you see here, the first line here has away, away. Alliteration, they cannot sleep them through. Last line you see here, they cannot, that they cannot sleep them through. Repetition of the and the. This makes it alliteration. That is, the beginning sound is same or similar. Stanza 2 and 3. We are going to do stanzas together because there are not many poetic devices used in this. There is simile. If you see here, and the children look like bear cubs. The children have been compared to bear cubs. Why? Because they are very funny and cuddly. So simile is one thing compared to the other, and the children look like bear cubs because of the use of the word like. This is a simile. Alliteration. Alliteration means in a string of words if the beginning sound is same or similar, like look like, furry, funny, they, tell, them. The, it's the same family sound words. Yet, you, initially ear sound. Learn a lesson, L, initially L sound. Tell the tale too. If you see, it's the same family, tell the tale too. This makes it alliteration. Initial sounds are same or similar. Stanza 4, 5. Again, it is alliteration. Where a little woman was. So if you speak it fast, they are more like tongue twisters. Initial sound were, where woman was. Once, when. This makes it alliteration. So where the little woman was. Now there is a little difference. If you see once and when, it begins with an O and W. Still this is alliteration because when you speak these words once, when, the initial sound is same. Therefore this also makes it alliteration. This will also be counted as alliteration. Inversion. What is inversion? Inversion is wrong order of words. The words, a little bit change in order of the words is there. This can be done to add interest, to lay emphasis on a certain point, or also to make the poem rhyme. The poet plays a little bit with the order of the words. This is called alliteration. Like if we see here in stanza 5, he came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth. So ideally it should be in traveling round the earth, he came to the order of a cottage. So line 1 should be 2, 2 should be 1. So here the poet has played with the order, the sequencing. This is called inversion. Now what is assonance? Assonance is repetition of a vowel sound in a string of words. So if the same vowel is repeated in all the words or almost all the words in a string of words, in a sentence, in a line, that is called assonance. So how woman was making cakes becomes assonance here. Repetition of A. Woman A, was A, making A, cakes A. So repetition of A in all the words in a line. This is called assonance. Stanza 6 and 7 give us the devices. Rhyme. You see here done and one. That makes it rhyme. And in stanza 7, second line and last words lay and away. That makes it rhyme. Alliteration, faint with fasting. The sound of F. Faint, fasting. Faint with fasting. Stanza 6, first line here. Again, inversion, wrong order of the words. The poet has played a little bit with the order of the words so that the lines rhyme here. He asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. So what should be the correct order? He asked her to give him a single one from her store of cakes. Right? So that should be the correct order. But the poet has played with the order of the words here. Therefore this is inversion. But as it baking, lay. What should be the correct order? But as it lay baking. So the lay should come before baking. This is what makes it inversion. Stanza 8 and 9. Rhyme, one and done. If you see here stanza 8, second and last line, last words one and done. These are rhyming words. And flat and that. Stanza 9, second and last line, flat and that. This is what is the rhyme. Alliteration, still a smaller. Stanza 8, here still a smaller S, the repeated sound of S, still a smaller is alliteration. Simile, as large as the first one has done. So the second cake is compared with the first cake. In which feature or in which quality? The size. The size was same according to the woman. It was as large as the first. So this pattern, as large as, also makes it a simile. Either the use of the word like, something is like something else, or something as dash as something, they both are similes. So again, thin as a wafer. So the cake has been compared to a wafer. Here if you see stanza 9, third line, thin as a wafer. She baked it thin as a wafer, like a wafer, as thin as a wafer. All these three patterns, if you see, that makes it a simile. One thing is compared to the other. So here cake has been compared to a wafer. Again we have inversion, but it looked when she turned it over as large as the first had done. So if you see, what should be the correct order here? This is stanza 8, but it looked as large as the first had done when she turned it over. Okay, right, this should be the correct order. So the poet here has played a little bit with the order of the phrases, therefore this becomes inversion. Repetition, rolled and rolled. When she rolls it really thin, I explained it also. The poet has used repetition here so as to emphasize on how thin the woman must have rolled the dough. Stanza 9, second line, rolled and rolled. So this is called repetition because the same word has been repeated in the same line. That's called repetition. Stanza 10 and 11, alliteration, seem too small, seem too small, repetition of the sound S. So she put them on the shelf. So, she and shelf. That makes it alliteration. And surely such. This line, and surely such a woman. So this phrase, surely such. It is a similar family, sure sir. That makes it alliteration. The beginning sound of a string of words is same. Stanza 12 and 13. Anaphora. What is anaphora? When a word or a phrase is repeated in the beginning of consecutive lines or phrases. So if you see here in stanza 12, second and third line both begin with to. So to dwell, to have. This makes it anaphora. Alliteration, build as the birds do. Repeated sound of B. That is build as the birds do. Repetition, boring and boring and boring. So this phrase and boring has been repeated in the same line. This makes it repetition. Stanza 14 and 15 here. Inversion. Then up she went through the chimney. So what should be the right order? Then she went up through the chimney. Instead of then up she went, it should be then she went up through the chimney. And out of the top flew a woodpecker. What should be the correct order? And a woodpecker flew out of the top. So that should be the correct order. Here the poet has played a little bit with the order of the words just to create interest here. That is called inversion. Alliteration, she had a scarlet. Stanza 15, she had a scarlet cap. Repetition of sure sir. Same family sounds in the beginning of consecutive or in the same line. That is called alliteration. Simile, black as coal. Rest of her clothes were burned, black as a coal. So her clothes, her burned clothes have been compared to coal. Using the word as, like I told you, this is simile. Stanza 16, alliteration, the trees till this. Here, if you see in this line where she lives in the trees till this very day, the trees till this, the same similar sound, the It's the same family. That's what makes it alliteration. Repetition again, boring and boring, done earlier. Rhyme, wood and food. Second and last line here, rhyming words. In the end, wood and food. That is rhyme. Hoping that you liked the video. Meet you with my next video. Till then, keep watching, keep learning. Thank you.